Yeah, welcome back to the second part of our second lesson, which is mostly to do with the principles of human conversation and about the different foundational psychology principles and also about personas and everything that is useful to in turn make a good bot experience. So in the first part, we actually discussed about Dreyse's cooperative principles and maxims about how conversation should be structured. What are the four main parts of a conversation? So there is maxim of quality, which means that you have to always make sure that you only tell them what you can tell actually, or be truthful and only say what you believe to be true. So, for example, this chatbot cannot really book a plane, so it says that it cannot book a plane. And in terms of maximum of quantity, it says about being informative but not more than what's necessary. So that is to do with the message length and also telling exactly what the user wants to hear without exaggerating and unnecessarily giving information that's not needed. So, for example, if you take a look at this message, so it does, when we ask, are there any offers, it tells exactly about the offer only. So that's what's needed at the end of the day. And maximum of relation is another aspect which is to be relevant to the ongoing conversation. So you can see that same message continues, and all of these are coherent and consistent with the previous part of the message. So it still continues and it continues asking, would you like to know more about our pricing plans or any other features, which is still relevant to the offers. That is about relation, and the other one is manner. So the way the things are presented. So we have to always make sure that things are clear, brief, and always orderly, so that people can easily understand what is being said. So, for example, this may also include things like structuring it with proper formatting, so people can easily see a step-by-step guide if it's needed to, or they can see bolded words so that they can understand that there is an emphasis and so on and so forth. So that is those are the four maxims. So that was the part that we discussed. And apart from that, we also talked about turn taking and conversation flow, which means that, for example, when you have a conversation with anyone, you of course follow a sequence, right? So not everyone doesn't jump in and voice their opinions, right? You wait until the person has finished talking before you talk. So that's the same thing. So we also have to make sure that the bot will wait till the user sends his message and then respond. And even if the user interrupts and switches a conversation, the bot should be able to understand and adapt according to that. So that is about the turn taking and also about the conversational flow. So today we are planning to look into the part two, which is more towards personas, empathy, and emotional intelligence. So this is about not just the bots, not just your persona, not just your personality, but also the personality of the bot. So when we are actually designing a bot, we have to actually think, or maybe a better term is a conversational agent. One of the things that we have to think about is the bot's personality, because we have to make sure that it sounds more and more realistic and more like a human, so that people will feel a connection. If it's too monotonous and robotic, people are going to tune out, right? They're not going to be engaged and interactive with the bot, right? So for example, if you send a message, hi, how are you, and if it says I can't respond or something, I mean, that's not very personal, or that's not very helpful. And also, if you ask, for example, some you make a mistake in one of your words when you're typing, if it just says I don't understand, that's not very helpful, right? So it just say, so I'm sorry, I couldn't quite understand, could you please rephrase it for me, something like that. So that makes it more personal, right? So those sort of things, the way that the bot expresses its opinions, the way that it interacts and so on, it's personal, its personality. So that is another aspect that we have to look into. So before we move further, let me get. And now let's take a look at how we actually make these personas and how we understand what the user wants to do and what the bot should be able to assist you in. So for that, there is a framework called the conversation design canvas. So this is actually a framework that allows you to fill out some details and understand exactly what type of a bot you should be making. So one of the things that you have to think about is the scene. So the scene means that what exactly is the use case for this bot. For example, is this a healthcare bot? Is this a bot that serves as a simple assistant for a website just to find information? Or is this a bot which helps people to book a plane? Those sort of things. So the physical context is where it is located on which web pages and everything it is located on. The social context is when it is used for example, when the people want to book a ticket in a flight reservation site. And the time factors is what exactly is the time that people are using it. So those are some factors that you can think about in terms of the setting up the scene. And in terms of the user's needs, we have to think about what the user wants to do. And we also have to think about what he wants to know by engaging with this chatbot. For example, the user may want to know how to contact a business, or the user may want to know what's the steps he has to follow in order to purchase a product. Those sort of things. So what he wants to know, what he wants to do. So what he wants to do is if he wants to buy a product or he wants to contact the business, and what he wants to know is the contact information or the price of a product. So those sort of things. And then we have to think about his mindset as well. So what he's motivated by, what are his motivations? So he's, for one example is he is motivated to actually get to travel abroad if he wants to interact with a flight agent, right? So that is his motivation. So he wants to get, he's motivated by his desire to fly abroad. What he worries about is he feels that this may be a difficult process. So those sort of things. He may worry about the cost of the plane. He may worry about that this is a difficult process. I had to fill a lot of forms. Those sort of things. What he expects is, what are his expectations to using this system? He wants to make it his life simple. He wants to easily find a suitable plane and easily book a ticket. What he feels are his feelings when using the application or the bot. So he may feel overwhelmed initially. He may feel relaxed when he sees that there's an agent that can help him, that is friendly with him. So those sort of things. And any other assumptions that you have about the user, you can actually write it here. And in terms of the bot's needs, we have to think about the bot's superpowers. So what the bot should be able to do. So the thing is this, so just because the bot is an airline reservation bot, that means in the sense a flight booking bot, doesn't mean that it can always show you. Well, that's a bad example, but yeah. So what the bot can do, for example, will be able to show you the available flights. It will be able to book a flight for you. It will be able to show you when's the next flight and those sort of things. But what it can't do is, for example, it can't book your hotel, right? So if it's a flight booking system, it's only for flights. It's not for hotels or anything, just because it's booking. So those are sort of things. So what it can do is it can help you book flights, it can help you get information about flights and so on. But what it can't do is actually help you book a hotel or help you book your next vacation, maybe a resort plan or something, because that's not what the airline company does at the end of the day, right? And what it can tell are the things that it is allowed to tell. For example, it is allowed to tell some specific details about the flight, right? But it can't tell, for example, who are other passengers in the plane, right? That's privacy details. It's a privacy concern, actually. So, for example, you can't go and expect the bot to communicate to you that, for example, let's just assume that your friend is traveling on the plane, even. So, the flight bot should not be able to tell you that your friend is attending, right? Because then that's a violation of his privacy. Or even if it's someone totally a stranger to you, because then that could also come as off as stalking. So I mean, it's not something that we want the bot to be able to do, right? So we have to mention what the bot should be able to tell the user. So it should be the information about the flights, it should be information about the available next flights, it should be about the price and so on, but not about the passengers, not about who is the pilot, not about those sort of details, because those are confidential details. And what the bot knows already is mostly is knowledge sources. So it's knowledge base, you could call. So for example, when you're making a flight bot, you have to of course enter information about flights. You should mention about what are the available flights. You should give or feed all of those information to the bot so that it can understand it and respond accordingly. It can't create information out of its own. I mean, it can, but if it does that, it's going to be hallucination. And hallucination, I think, if I may have mentioned it before, but if I haven't, hallucination means the bot giving improper responses or incorrect responses, which is not what is expected from the bot to be given. So, for example, you ask something about a plane and it talks to you about a car. So it's totally irrelevant and not coherent with what you're talking about, right? So we have to build a knowledge base. So that's about what the bot knows already. And then the other thing is the bot's responsibilities. So what the bot must ask from the user. and what the bot must tell to the user, what the bot can promote to the user, and what the bot should discourage the user from doing. So those sort of things are also things that we have to think about when we are actually making the bot. So just to give an example about that. So now let's take a look at how this works. So that means in the sense, I'll just add some context to each of these so that it'll be easier for you to understand exactly what happens here. So for example, when we talk about physical context, this is what is included. So it talks about the the different physical aspects. So is the user at home or is he on the move and so on. So seems like the space is not enough to write this. And so one option that we have is we can of course increase the size of this. Then we'll be able to. Okay. So one of the things that we have to think about is the user at home or on the go. So we mentioned that. So let's just assume that, yeah, first of all, let's populate all of this data. So yeah, I populated the design canvas so that you can understand it even better. And when you are referring it again, so this talks about the physical environment, like I mentioned before, and this talks about who is involved in the conversation. This talks about the different time factors about when the user is engaging with it, how much time that the user has to complete the task, and so on. And also talking about the goals, we have what the user wants to achieve, specific actions or outcomes, what information that the user wants to get, what the user is motivated by, why is he actually engaging with this conversation, what concerns or fears that he may have about the system, also about what he expects and experiences through this, yeah, let's just wrap these two. Yeah, what the user expects from this system and what emotions that he may have when using the system. And in terms of other assumptions, this can be any other assumptions that the user may be having. And in terms of bot stuff, we have the what the bot can do, what the bot can tell. So this is about what the bot can do. So it can of course access the information that's available. But this depends. So real-time data is very deterministic, and in the sense it depends on your situation. So if you want a bot that is always up to date with the latest data, then yeah, it should be able to access real time. But more often than not, if it's a website bot, it's not real time, because maintaining a real time bot is more costly. You have to keep updating information, so that's going to take a long time. So that's all totally up to what you need to do, and what the bot can't do is what it is incapable of doing. For example, like I mentioned before, it should be able to, if it's a plain bot, it should not be able to answer about hotels, and it should not be able to help you book a hotel or anything. What it knows already is about the aspects that it knows about, maybe the user's information, maybe about the knowledge base that it has, which is the, if it's real-time data, the real-time data sources, and if it's data, it is the preset pre-built knowledge base, which includes the information about the website, information about the planes if it's a plane bot, and so on. And what it can tell is about what it can tell in a specific scenario. So if it's a plane bot, it should be able to tell about flights and so on. But if it's a weather bot, it should be able to give weather updates. So on. And what the bot should be able to ask from the user, or what people should ask from the bot to actually get necessary information. So for example, yeah, so this is actually about what the bot should be asking from the user. For example, if the user wants to book a plane, it should be able to ask him when is the date that you want to book the plane, because otherwise it's not able to help the user, right? And also, do you need any assistance with payment if it needs help with, if the, so that the user can get assistance if he needs any assistance when using the bot. And also what it should tell the person while using the bot. So it should tell, for example, I have acknowledged your name as Abdullah Jasmine, and I see that you want to book the plane on this date, and those sort of things. So it should tell the user, otherwise the user doesn't know that the bot has saved those details. And yeah, so it should promote certain behaviors. So for example, it should help the help engage the user so that the user will give feedback. So it should say, that's great. Thank you for using our bot. Would you like to provide any feedback? So that sort of thing. So that the user will be able to provide feedback so that we can improve the bot later. And also it should help the user to complete the purchase as well, right? So it should guide him through completing the purchase and making sure that he completes the purchase. So that's sort of behaviors that the bot should encourage is what we focus on promotes. And what we discourage is what the bot should try to avoid the user from doing. For example, he should try to avoid the user from engaging in unnecessary conversations that is not related to the domain. For example, the user may be suggesting something explicit which is not intended in the bot's use case. So we have guardrails for that, of course. But even if we do not have guardrails, we should be able to limit it, because we don't want the bot to provide unnecessary information, or we don't want the user to engage in unnecessary conversations with the bot, right? We want to, as much as possible, stick it to what is exactly the use case of the bot. So for example, if it's a bot which is providing information about a business, if someone suggests a competitor to that bot, if you suggest a competitor, of course that's not something that we want the user to do, right? We want the user to focus only on the bot. We don't want them to focus on competitors or anyone else. So if the user suggests something like, this business is better than your business, or this business has much better sales than your business, and so on, we should not further engage the user in those lines of conversations, right? We should try to, as much as possible, resolve it in a minor extent without disclosing too much information, or without unnecessarily engaging in the discussion, so that we can move on to something more within the context. So one thing we can do in that situation is, and something that we actually tried, is when, for example, when we make a chatbot for a creator, like maybe SLV, look, when someone suggests another channel, let's say another news channel, what we do to the bot, through the bot, is we say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm unable to help with this, let's stick to this conversation, because we don't want him to address and engage that. So that's what handles with guardrails. A better implementation is if we can make it dynamic through guardrails, in the sense we can make it say, thank you for your opinion, but I'm here to help you with this specific thing. So let's just discuss about that. So that sort of thing will be more feasible and practical for such a user. But if the user goes to say that your information is inaccurate and so on, we have to, of course, be open to admitting it if it is inaccurate, because sometimes the bot can make mistakes. But sometimes the user may be faking it, or falsely accusing the bot of making a mistake. So the bot should be able to stand ground and mention that it is correct. And also, it should not further engage. For example, the user may purposely give misinformation. Let's just say it's a news bot. So the user may purposely put misinformation, in the sense the user may say something like, this specific person was not arrested today, although the news explicitly says that he's arrested today. So the bot should be able to stand its ground and say, no, this is what I have, according to my sources, this is what's correct. So if the user further says something else, it should make a note of it, of course, and it should, of course, we should be able to, of course, see through the backend that such an interaction has happened. So the bot can log it, of course. But what the bot shouldn't do is, the bot shouldn't accept it and communicate that the next time, unless the developers of the bot actually correct it in the knowledge base. So if the bot goes to admit it and change its knowledge base, that means that anyone can manipulate the bot, right? So we want to avoid that. So we have to, as much as possible, discourage the user from switching the conversations and try to stick him to the main conversation. And we shouldn't also interrupt the user, and we shouldn't, because if we interrupt the user, then the user is going to get discouraged. So that's sort of a thing. So that is about the conversation design canvas. So this pretty much covers a huge aspect about making a good bot. And once you cover all of these factors, you will be able to have a good enough bot. So you will be able to have a bot that understands what exactly it's supposed to do, what its social context is, and what its superpowers in the sense what it can do, and so on. And also you'll be able to understand what are its responsibilities, what the user expects, and so on. So this sort of thing will be helpful when designing a good quality bot. For example, you do not want to make a bot that communicates the same way to old people and young people, right? Because the mentalities are totally different. So if an old person is engaging with the bot, they may expect long and detailed responses. They may expect very much guided steps, because they don't really understand the technology. But if it's a user, a normal young adult, they may expect everything to be fast, because they don't really have much time on their hands. They want to get things done fast. So we have to be able to adapt according to the user. So those sort of things also can be identified through this design canvas, but you can, of course, make multiple copies of it. And yeah, you can mention the specific use case as well. So then you'll be able to accommodate and adapt the bot to assist any type of user. So that's the idea at the end of the day. So that's what we look into the EI and the empathy and the persona in these conversations. So yeah, so I think that addresses some of the common mistakes as well. But some other mistakes are, for example, not understanding what the user wants to really do. So that's what really happens when you don't prepare a canvas, or when you don't have a proper structure to what you're going to do, because then you may make these sort of mistakes. So one of the mistakes that you may make is make it the bot only able to answer to a specific niche without really able to assist the user with other sort of things, in the sense, I mean, which are still related to the bot. So maybe, for example, you have made it as a flight booking bot, but it doesn't really, it only is able to book a flight, but it can't really tell what are the flights that are available. That means, for example, if you mention a flight name, it will book the flight, but it won't really show you all of the list of the available flights. So that's sort of a mistake, right? Because, and that's a very bad use case, in the sense, so we can't assume that the user every time knows all of the flights that are available, right? So we have to, of course, provide the user with the information so that he can understand it and do what he wants to do with that information. So those sort of things are important, and we also have to make sure that we follow a proper flow when we are designing the conversations. So we don't want to really keep the payment part in the beginning and then get the form details, right? So those sort of things we should of course avoid. And also another mistake, so this is actually, it can be also a misunderstanding. For example, let's just say in this situation, so this was the what I used to show, the conversational flow. So for example, let's say that the information that the user is asking is about dogs, but we only have information about cats. So the bot shouldn't really go explaining about cats just because he has information only about cats, right? He should be able to understand and tell that it doesn't know. I mean, that's a better response than giving something that the user totally unexpects, doesn't expect. Yeah, so those are sort of some mistakes that can really happen when you're engaging in these conversational interactions. So it can either be from the user side, of course, so the user may assume that the bot knows something, but the bot doesn't really know it, or it can be from the bot side in terms of hallucination. So these are sort of mistakes that we want to actually handle and avoid. So for that, we have some mechanisms which we'll get to in the later parts of the lessons. So I think that pretty much covers up lesson 2. So next, let's move on to lesson 3, which we'll be releasing shortly. So yeah, thank you for joining the lesson 2. So yeah, this has been a long episode with 2 parts. See you in the next one.